Aisha stood behind the counter of the small lakeside cafe, wiping a glass for the 10th time. It was already clean, but her eyes kept drifting to the door. She felt like she was waiting for something her mind didn't understand, but her heart somehow expected. On that quiet morning, with the air cool and the sky painted in soft colors, a young man walked in. He wore old clothes, a faded gray backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. His hair was slightly messy, as if he had slept on a bus or under the open sky. The moment he stepped inside, something about him made Aisha's fingers freeze around the glass. He looked simple, too simple compared to the usual tourists who flocked to the lake. Yet, there was a calmness in his walk, a quiet strength in his eyes. It was a feeling she couldn't name, as if his presence carried a story deeper than the lake outside. The cafe wasn't busy yet. A few early customers sat by the window, scrolling on their phones or sipping tea. Her colleagues, usually loud in the mornings, suddenly narrowed their eyes at the stranger. They started whispering, their tones sharp and judgmental. "Backpacker. Probably broke," one said while arranging spoons. "He'll order one cheap tea and sit for hours." Another muttered, "These travelers never tip." Someone else added, what surprised Aisha wasn't their words, but how the young man didn't seem bothered at all. He seemed used to being misjudged wherever he went. He walked slowly toward the window seat, the one facing the lake, and placed his backpack on the floor with gentle care, as if it held something precious. As he settled in, Aisha noticed the slight tiredness in his eyes, but also a softness, the kind that comes from long journeys and long nights spent alone. She took a deep breath and approached his table, feeling strangely nervous. "What would you like to have, sir?" she asked. He lifted his head and looked at her. His eyes were a warm brown, and they surprised her. They didn't match his simple clothes. They were calm, steady, and full of depth, like he had lived many lives inside one. His voice was quiet but polite when he replied, "Just a cup of tea, thank you." The words were simple, but his tone carried a weight she couldn't explain, as if he was hiding something heavy in his heart. As she walked back to prepare his order, she felt an unusual pull toward him. It wasn't because he was handsome in an obvious way, but because there was something familiar in his presence, something that made her chest tighten. She glanced at him again. He wasn't scrolling on a phone like everyone else. He was simply watching the lake, his gaze calm but sad, like he was remembering something painful. Just as she was taking the tea to him, a loud and rude customer burst into the cafe. He was a regular who always acted like the world owed him something. He walked straight to the counter, demanding attention. Then he saw the simple-looking traveler by the window. He laughed mockingly, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "People like him ruin the place's image. Look at those clothes, why do you let beggars sit here?" His words sliced through the quiet cafe. The other staff stayed silent, not wanting trouble, but Aisha felt a sharp anger rise inside her. Before she could stop herself, she turned to the rude customer. "He's not a beggar. He is a customer just like everyone else. And we treat everyone with respect here." Her voice shook slightly, not with fear, but with emotion. For a second, she worried she had spoken too boldly. But then, the traveler, the young man, lifted his gaze from the window. He looked at her with a small, grateful smile. It was soft and genuine, and it carried more emotion than words ever could. The rude customer rolled his eyes, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out of the cafe. Aisha let out a slow breath, embarrassed that she had reacted so strongly. When she turned back to the traveler, he was still looking at her, not with pity or amusement, but with a quiet gratitude that made her heart beat a little faster. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft. "Not many people stand up for strangers." Aisha replied shyly, "You didn't deserve that." She tried to hide how flustered she felt. Something about his tone made her want to listen to him more, to understand who he really was, beneath that simple appearance. The morning passed, and the cafe got busier, but Aisha's eyes kept drifting back to him. She watched the way he held his teacup with both hands, as if appreciating its warmth. She watched the way he looked out the window, as if searching for answers in the moving water of the lake. Every time their eyes met, even for a second, she felt that strange pull, a quiet spark, something gentle yet powerful. Her colleagues continued their whispers, laughing at the idea that someone dressed like him could be important. But Aisha felt the opposite. She felt there was a hidden story in him, a truth that didn't match his tired look. As she watched him pack his backpack after finishing his tea, she felt a tightness in her chest, a strange fear that she might never see him again, even though they had spoken only a few words. Just as he reached the door, he turned around. He looked at her one last time, the morning light falling across his face in a soft golden line. In that brief moment, Aisha's heart whispered something she did understand yet but couldn't ignore. He is not what he looks like. She didn't know his name, his story, or his secrets, but she knew one thing. Something deep inside her recognized him. It wasn't her mind, it was her heart, as if fate had quietly placed him in her path. And that whisper grew stronger when she saw the way he carried himself, not like a poor traveler, not like someone lost, but like someone hiding a truth too heavy to show the world. Aisha had no idea that this simple-looking man was carrying $1 million secret, a life far bigger than anyone in that cafe could ever imagine. She didn't know that he had walked away from a world of wealth, power, and responsibility, choosing to move through life unseen, unrecognized, and untouched by people who judged him only by his appearance. She didn't know that the story just beginning between them would change everything she believed about love, trust, and destiny. All she knew, in that single moment when his eyes met hers before he left, was that something inside her had awakened. It was something she couldn't name, something she couldn't stop, something her heart recognized even though her mind didn't understand. And as the door closed behind him, Aisha felt an emptiness she couldn't explain, a soft ache that whispered his presence back to her. A new chapter had just begun, and she was standing right at the start, waiting for the story. The next morning, Aisha woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest. It was that feeling you get when something small but meaningful happens, and your heart just keeps replaying it. She tried to focus on her routine, hurrying through breakfast, tying her hair back, adjusting her apron, but her mind kept drifting to the quiet traveler from yesterday. His calm eyes, the way he looked at the lake like he was searching for pieces of himself in its reflection, and especially that soft smile of gratitude he gave her after she stood up for him. She told herself it was nothing. Customers came and went all the time. But deep down, she felt a connection had silently clicked between them, without asking for permission. When she reached the cafe, the morning breeze carrying the cool scent of the lake, she found herself glancing at the entrance more often than she wanted to admit. She was hoping without actually accepting that she was hoping that he would walk in again. Each time the door opened for someone else, a tiny pang of disappointment pricked her heart, even though she tried to hide it from herself. The cafe grew busier as the sun climbed higher, filled with the clatter of cups and the hum of conversation. Aisha moved around with her usual gentle smile, but a part of her remained distracted, restless, waiting. And then, just as she turned to pick up another tray, the door opened once more. It was him, the same simple clothes, the same faded backpack, the same quiet presence, but this time, when his eyes found hers, it wasn't by accident. It felt like he had come back not for the tea, not for the view, but because something inside him had pulled him back to this place, to her. Aisha felt her breath catch softly, a quiet surprise that warmed her chest. She quickly looked down at the trays, pretending to be unaffected, though her racing heartbeat betrayed her. He walked to the same window seat as before, placing his backpack carefully on the floor. She noticed this time how he handled his things with care, like someone who valued what he had, even if it didn't look valuable to others. When she approached his table, he looked up with a polite smile, the corners of his eyes crinkling with warmth. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle and respectful. "If it's not too much trouble, can I have the same tea as yesterday?" His soft tone made her feel oddly comfortable. She just nodded with a smile and walked away, feeling that strange warmth spread through her again. As she prepared his tea, she could feel her coworkers' eyes on her. They whispered things like, "Why does he keep coming here? And maybe he has nowhere else to go." Someone even teased, "Look at Aisha, she smiles too much when talking to him." She ignored their words. Not because she was brave, but because something inside her knew their judgment was shallow. They couldn't see the deeper truth she was feeling. When she placed the tea in front of him, he thanked her softly, his eyes holding a gratitude that seemed bigger than the small gesture. For the next few minutes, he just sat there, watching the lake as if it calmed something restless inside him. Later, finding a free moment, Aisha walked over to his table. "You like sitting here, right? By the window?" she asked casually. He looked at her, then nodded. "Yes, the lake is peaceful. It reminds me of things I sometimes forget." Her curiosity sparked. Good things or sad things? For a second, a flicker of pain crossed his eyes, a deep memory, before he gave a faint smile. Maybe both. His answer made her heart ache. She wanted to know what pain he carried, what storms were hidden behind his quiet smile. They spoke a little more that morning, about the weather, the cafe, the lake, small things that somehow felt meaningful between them. Aisha found herself liking the way he listened, not just with his ears, but with his whole presence, as if he truly cared about every word. When he stood up to leave, he said softly, "Thank you for the tea, and thank you for yesterday." Aisha felt her cheeks warm as she nodded shyly. After he left, she noticed an older couple nearby had been watching him. They whispered to each other, "He speaks like an educated man, not like someone struggling." A small thrill ran through her. She had sensed the same thing. Over the next week, a pattern formed. Every morning, he would walk into the cafe, take the same window seat, and order the same tea. And each day Aisha found herself talking to him a little more. She learned small things. He liked sunrises, quiet places, and traveling alone. He liked his tea with less sugar. But she also sensed what he didn't say, that he carried loneliness, memories, and a story much bigger than he let on. One evening, after the cafe had closed, Aisha stepped outside to take out the trash. To her surprise, he was standing near the lake, his figure silhouetted by the orange sunset. His back was to her, and he stood perfectly still, breathing slowly, as if trying to release something heavy. Just as she was about to turn back, she heard him exhale, a shaky, emotional sound. She realized he might be crying. Hesitantly, she walked closer. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He quickly wiped his eyes and turned, trying to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine," he said quietly, "just thinking." Aisha wasn't convinced. "Sometimes thinking hurts more than anything else," she said with concern. He just looked at her, really looked, as if searching her face for something he didn't know he needed. Finally, he spoke. "Sometimes people run away from life, even when they have everything." That sentence stunned her. Everything. He didn't look like someone who had much. His words didn't match his simple clothes or faded backpack. She wanted to ask more, but his expression told her not to push. They stood in silence, watching the sunset together. After a long moment, he whispered, "Thank you for checking on me," and left. The next day he arrived later than usual, his eyes a little tired, but his small smile felt warmer. They spoke more that day, and the day after. Slowly, Aisha pieced things together. He never checked prices. He knew more about business than the actual businessmen who visited. His hands were soft, not calloused from manual labor. And sometimes, when he paid, she'd catch a glimpse of a gold symbol engraved inside his wallet, something expensive, before he quickly hid it. One afternoon, she overheard two businessmen talking about a famous young millionaire who had recently disappeared. He owned multiple companies but had vanished without a trace, leaving his board panicking. When they described him, his calm nature, quiet smile, and preference for simple clothes, despite his wealth, a chilling realization hit her. She looked at the traveler sipping his tea. Could it be him? No, it couldn't be. Why would a millionaire hide here? But the thought wouldn't leave. Then, one evening, the truth came crashing in. A sleek, black luxury car pulled up outside. A man in a suit got out, scanned the area, and walked inside. His eyes locked onto the traveler. Aisha watched as the suited man approached him, his voice sharp and low. "Sir, they are still searching for you. Please return. The board is losing patience." Aisha froze. The traveler, Sion, she would later learn, looked panicked for the first time. He whispered something back, but the man insisted, "You can't keep running like this." Aisha's heart dropped. He was running, but from what? Just then, Zion turned and saw her standing there. His expression shifted to fear, not of the man, but of what she had heard, of what she might now think. In that moment, Aisha realized the man she thought was a simple traveler was anything but. He wasn't poor. He wasn't ordinary. He was someone with a life so large it scared him into hiding. Aisha stood frozen as the man in the suit left the cafe. His steps were sharp and hurried, leaving behind a tension that filled the room like thick smoke. For a long moment, she didn't know what to do. Her hands trembled, her breath felt stuck in her throat, and her eyes remained locked on the traveler who suddenly seemed like a stranger, a puzzle she had been trying to solve without even knowing it. The cafe noise faded around her, voices turning into distant echoes, the clinking of cups sounding faint. Everything inside her focused on the man she thought she knew, the one who came every morning for tea, the one who looked simple and gentle, the one who seemed lost yet peaceful. He kept his eyes lowered, staring at the wooden table as if it could hide him. She could see him breathing slowly, like someone trying to calm a storm inside his chest. When he finally looked up, their eyes met for a second that felt like an entire story unfolding: fear, apology, vulnerability, something unspoken but loud enough for her heart to hear. She didn't say anything, and he didn't say anything, but the silence between them held more emotion than any words could. After a few seconds, he stood up quietly, lifted his backpack with hands that shook slightly, and walked toward the door without looking back. Aisha watched him go, confusion and hurt twisting inside her like tangled threads. The moment the door closed behind him, she felt her heart drop in a way she had never felt before. It wasn't just because he left, but because she realized he had been hiding something big, something deep, something that explained everything she had sensed from the first moment she saw him. For the rest of the day, she worked like a shadow of herself, moving on instinct. Her mind replayed every detail she had noticed about him: his calmness, his educated way of talking, the rare sadness in his eyes, the gold symbol inside his wallet he always tried to hide, the way he spoke like someone who carried responsibilities far bigger than the life he pretended to live. Suddenly, it all felt connected, like pieces falling into place too quickly for her heart to process. When she finally got home that night, she sat on her bed, thinking about what the suited man had said. "Sir, they are still searching for you. You cannot keep running." Running? From what, or from who? And why did he look so scared when she overheard them? She closed her eyes and remembered the businessman from the other day, talking about the missing young millionaire. Their description matched him too perfectly, even though she didn't want to believe it. But deep inside, she knew. Something in her heart whispered the truth before her mind could accept it. The next morning, she arrived at the cafe feeling both nervous and strangely hopeful. Would he come back? Would he avoid her? Would anything ever be normal again? Hours passed. The breakfast rush came and went. The sun climbed higher, the cafe filled with noise and movement, but he did not walk through the door. Her coworkers noticed her looking at the entrance too often and teased her lightly, but she ignored them. She wasn't just waiting for a customer. She was waiting for answers, for understanding, for the truth. Just when she began to lose hope, the door opened quietly in the late afternoon. He stepped inside. He wasn't looking at anyone, not carrying his usual soft smile, not even glancing around for a place to sit. He walked straight to the window seat like it was the only safe place in the world. Aisha felt her heart tighten when she saw him. He looked tired, more tired than before, his shoulders a little heavier, his eyes carrying shadows she hadn't noticed earlier. She approached him slowly, her voice barely a whisper as she asked, "Are you okay?" He looked at her with surprise, as if he didn't expect her to still speak to him after yesterday. After a few seconds, he nodded faintly, though his eyes told a different story. She placed his tea on the table, even though he hadn't ordered, and he looked at the cup for a long moment before saying softly, "Thank you." Again. She sat on the edge of the table beside him for a moment, pretending to wipe the surface, just to stay near him without making him uncomfortable. She waited, not pushing, not forcing, just waiting. And slowly, he began to speak. He didn't talk about the suited man, or about who he was, but about things that hinted at a truth too large to hide. He talked about how people often loved someone only for what they could see, not for who they truly were inside. He talked about how appearances created walls, how judgment hurt more than loneliness, how sometimes a person wanted to disappear from their own life just to breathe. With each sentence, Aisha felt her heart expanding with understanding, realizing the pain behind his silence, the exhaustion behind his calmness, the weight behind his simple clothes. But still, he didn't tell her everything, not yet. As the days passed, she began noticing signs everywhere, small clues that slowly revealed the truth he was hiding. When a group of tourists asked him for directions in English, he spoke fluently, with perfect confidence, like someone who had traveled far beyond what his appearance suggested. When the cafe owner complained about declining business, he gently offered advice that sounded like expert strategy, the kind only educated or experienced people understood. When Aisha once mentioned her dream of opening her own bakery, he listened with intense focus, then described practical steps she could take: financial planning, marketing ideas, ways to build a customer base. His words were smooth, precise, and clear, the way successful people talk. Each time he spoke like that, the truth became harder to ignore. One evening, he accidentally dropped his wallet while paying for his tea. When she picked it up for him, the golden symbol flashed again, a design too elegant, too expensive, too unique to belong to someone living simply. He snatched the wallet back quickly, apologizing, his face tense. The way he rushed to hide it confirmed the growing suspicion in her heart. The truth was forming in her mind like a picture sharpening. He was not who he pretended to be. But even as she realized it, she didn't feel scared or angry. She felt protective, almost afraid for him. Whatever he was running from must have been heavy enough to make him leave a life most people would never walk away from. Then came the night that changed everything. The cafe was about to close, the chairs half-stacked, the air cool and quiet. Aisha stepped outside to lock the door and found him sitting alone by the lake. His back to her, the moonlight reflecting in the water like broken glass. His shoulders looked heavy, his head slightly bowed. She knew something was wrong. She approached slowly and sat beside him, not saying anything at first. After a long silence, he whispered, "Why do people always believe what they see on the outside?" Aisha didn't know how to answer, so she simply said, "Maybe because it's easier than looking deeper." That made him close his eyes, his expression pained. After a few seconds, he murmured, "I wish people could see me the way you do." The sentence struck her heart like a soft blow, gentle but intense. She turned to him in confusion, asking quietly, "How do I see you?" He looked at her then, really looked, and said, "You see me? Not my clothes, not my silence, not my past. You see me." Aisha felt her breath catch. He spoke with such honesty that it made her chest tighten. She realized that he trusted her, not fully yet, but more than he trusted anyone else. Before she could reply, a sudden sound made them both turn, a phone vibrating inside his backpack. He hesitated, then pulled it out, and for the first time, Aisha saw it clearly. A sleek, expensive model, not something a simple traveler would carry. The screen lit up with multiple missed calls, messages, and notifications, company logos, important-looking emails, names she recognized from news articles. He saw the questions in her eyes. He sighed deeply and turned off the phone before placing it back inside his bag, as if trying to bury a part of himself. The next morning, Aisha noticed something unusual. The cafe owner was reading a newspaper, and the front page again showed the headline about the missing young millionaire. When she looked closer, her heart stopped. The blurred face in the picture looked shockingly like him. The resemblance was undeniable. Her hands trembled as she set the newspaper down. Should she confront him, or wait for him to trust her enough to tell her the truth himself? She didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, as he drank his tea quietly, a shadow fell on the table. Another man in a suit had entered the cafe, scanning the room with sharp eyes. This man was different from the one before. He looked angrier, more desperate, and his voice was firm as he said, "Sir, please stop making this difficult. You need to return. The board is threatening legal action." Legal action. Board. Sir, Aisha's heart pounded. The Travelesian looked at the man with frustration, guilt, and exhaustion swirling in his eyes. But what scared Aisha most was the fear beneath it. He wasn't just hiding, he was trying to escape something big. When the man left, Zion sat still for a long time, his hands clenched, his eyes distant. Aisha approached slowly, her voice gentle, as she asked, "Who are you, really?" For a moment, he didn't speak. He looked at her as if wondering whether telling the truth would break everything between them or finally set him free. His lips parted slightly, but before he could answer, a fresh wave of emotion crossed his face: fear, hesitation, longing, and something that looked a lot like hope. And in that moment, Aisha knew one thing for certain: the truth was coming, whether she was. The next morning arrived quietly, the soft sunlight sliding through the old wooden windows of the resort. In the distance, the peaceful sound of waves breaking gently against the shore created a serene melody. But inside Mia's heart, nothing felt peaceful. The storm from the previous night was still alive, loud, and painful. She tried to focus on her work, but her hands trembled every time she remembered the look on Ethan's face: hurt, disappointed, and yet, strangely understanding. It was as if he knew exactly why she had reacted the way she did. That thought made her chest feel heavy, almost crushing. He was a stranger, but he didn't feel like one. And she couldn't figure out how he had slipped so silently into her thoughts, occupying so much space. Mia did her best to act normal. She smiled at guests, answered their questions, and organized check-ins with a forced efficiency. But her mind kept drifting back to Ethan, his quiet face, his tired eyes, and the sheer strength with which he had walked away, like a man carrying a heavy, invisible burden. She hated the distance between them now, a chasm she had created herself. Guilt gnawed at her. She felt guilty for judging him, for hurting him, and most of all, for letting her old fears take control of her heart once again. And guilt, being a stubborn companion, followed her everywhere: into the bustling breakfast lounge, into the quiet staff room, even outside when she stepped out for a breath of fresh air. She leaned against the railing, staring blankly at the sea as the morning wind brushed against her hair, carrying with it the scent of salt and regret. While Mia was caught in her silent struggle, Ethan was sitting alone on a bench in the resort's garden. He watched the gardeners meticulously trimming the bushes, their movements precise and practiced, but his mind was miles away. He wasn't angry at Mia, not at all. He understood where her pain came from because he had been betrayed once, in a way that had made him question every relationship, every connection, for years afterward. So, when Mia's eyes had filled with fear, instead of trust last night, he recognized it immediately. He didn't see it as a weakness, but as a deep wound, still unhealed. That was why he hadn't pushed her further, and why he had remained silent when she asked him to leave. But he couldn't deny that her words had cut him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he had let his guard down. He had opened up, even if only a little, and allowed someone to see the softer part of his heart, the part he usually protected like a priceless, fragile secret. And now, sitting alone in the quiet garden, he wondered if it had all been a mistake. Maybe he had gotten too comfortable around her, too fast. Maybe he had completely misread her warm smiles and the easy kindness in her eyes. Maybe she was right to push him away. Yet, even as these thoughts circled in his mind, something deep within him refused to let go of the small, delicate connection they had shared. That quiet, beautiful bond that had grown so naturally between them in just a few short days. It felt too real to be an illusion. That afternoon, the universe conspired to force their paths to cross again. A group of guests began complaining loudly at the reception desk. Their tour booking had been mixed up by another staff member, but their frustration was directed entirely at Mia. One of the men was particularly rude, shouting at her even though it wasn't her fault. Mia tried to explain the situation politely, her voice calm despite her rising anxiety. But the man slammed his hand hard on the counter, the sharp sound making her flinch. Before she could even step back, Ethan was there. He appeared behind her as if from nowhere, his voice calm but laced with ice. He asked the man to lower his tone, stating firmly that no guest had the right to speak to the staff in such a disrespectful manner. The man argued back, his voice loud and aggressive, but Ethan didn't back down an inch. He stood firmly in front of Mia, like a shield, a silent protector. The tense standoff continued until the manager, hearing the commotion, rushed in to handle the situation. When everything finally settled down, Mia found herself trembling. It wasn't from fear of the angry guest, but from the overwhelming feeling of Ethan's unexpected protectiveness. The way he had stepped in without a moment's hesitation made her heart beat fast, almost painfully. For the first time, she realized how profoundly safe she felt around him. He was someone she could trust. Even when her own instincts told her to run, She managed to whisper a small thank you, her voice barely audible. Ethan only gave a slight nod before turning and walking away, leaving her before she could say anything more. A strange, hollow ache settled in her chest as she watched him go. Mia spent the rest of the day in a daze, her thoughts consumed by Ethan. She remembered every small moment they had shared, the easy laughter, the comfortable silence on the bus ride, the magic of their night walk, the deep sense of comfort she had felt whenever he spoke to her softly. She replayed it all in her mind like a favorite movie, and the more she remembered, the clearer it became. She had pushed away someone genuine, someone kind, someone who had seen her pain and, instead of running from it, had offered silent understanding. That realization scared her because caring for someone always scared her, but it also warmed her, a gentle heat spreading through her chest, because Ethan didn't feel like a mistake. He felt like something real, something rare. By evening, after hours of overthinking, pacing, and having silent arguments with herself, Mia made a decision. It was a choice she never expected herself to make, one that went against every self-protective instinct she had. She grabbed her scarf, took a deep, shuddering breath, and walked toward the garden where she had last seen him. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, a rhythm of fear and hope. She found him sitting alone again, on the same bench, this time staring at the sunset. His face was calm but etched with a deep wariness. She stood there for a long moment, her courage warring with her fear. Then, slowly, she walked forward, her footsteps soft on the grass, until she was close enough for him to feel her presence. Ethan looked up, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw her. She opened her mouth, trying to find the right words, the perfect apology, but nothing came out. Her throat felt tight. So, instead of speaking, she simply sat down beside him, her hands shaking slightly in her lap. A long silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward or tense, just full. Finally, she whispered that she was sorry. Not just for last night, but for everything. For judging him, for letting her fears hurt him, for pushing him away when all he had shown her was kindness. Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her with those calm, steady eyes. And Mia felt completely exposed, as if he could see every vulnerable, broken piece of her soul. Finally, he spoke. His voice was gentle, almost too gentle, when he told her that he didn't blame her, that he understood why she had reacted the way she did, and that he was not angry. His words, so full of grace and forgiveness, broke something inside her, something hard, something protective, something incredibly lonely that she had been carrying for years. As the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, it painted the sky in breathtaking shades of orange and gold. The two of them sat in silence, but the quiet between them was no longer heavy with unspoken words. It was warm, peaceful, and filled with a new understanding. Mia felt a definitive shift inside her that evening, like a heavy, rusted door creaking open, letting light pour into a room that had been dark for far too long. And though she didn't say it out loud, she knew it with a certainty that resonated deep in her bones. She didn't want Ethan to walk out of her life. Not now, not anymore. Ethan felt something change too, something subtle but real. It felt like the beginning of hope. As the cool evening wind wrapped around them like a soft blanket, both of them understood, without needing any words, that their story was not over. In fact, it was just beginning. Something deeper was on the horizon, something neither of them expected. Something that would soon reveal the truth. Ethan had been. The next day arrived with a soft breeze and a bright sky, but Mia woke up with a strange feeling in her heart. It was a mix of nervousness and hope, because she knew something had shifted between her and Ethan last night. Something delicate and warm, something that made her feel alive again, after so long. She dressed quickly, her mind filled with thoughts of him, wondering if he felt the same quiet closeness. As she reached the reception, she saw staff members moving around unusually fast, whispering to each other and adjusting things on the counter. It felt like they were preparing for something important. Mia frowned, confused, but kept working until the manager walked in with a nervous smile. He announced that the resort's real owner would arrive today for an unplanned inspection. The staff panicked instantly. Uniforms were adjusted, counters were cleaned again, and greetings were rehearsed. Mia's heart began to pound. The real owner. She had never seen him before, only heard stories. A young man, quiet and kind, but extremely private. None of the staff had ever met him in person. The idea of meeting him today made everyone anxious. And then, in the middle of all the chaos, Ethan walked through the front doors. He was calm, silent, with that same soft smile on his face. He wore the same simple clothes and had the same gentle eyes. But there was something different. Something in the way the staff suddenly stood straighter. Something in the way the manager rushed toward him with nervous excitement. Something in the way everyone began whispering the same sentence. "Sir, you're here." Finally, Mia froze. Her heart stopped. Her breath left her body like air escaping from a broken balloon. "Sir, owner." Ethan, what? She stared at him with wide eyes as the manager bowed slightly and began explaining the resort's performance. But Ethan's eyes were only on Mia, soft, nervous, almost apologetic. The world around her felt distant, as if she were underwater, hearing things but not truly understanding them. Everything she thought she knew, twisted in front of her. Ethan, the quiet man who carried a simple bag, who traveled like a common guest, who sat in the garden alone, who had protected her, was the owner, the millionaire owner. The man she once judged as having nothing. Shame washed over her so fast her cheeks burned. Her eyes stung with embarrassment, guilt, and disbelief. She wanted to run, she wanted to hide, but she couldn't move. After the manager finished speaking, Ethan gently excused himself and walked toward Mia. His steps were slow, almost careful, as if he was afraid she might break if he moved too fast. When he reached her, he gave her a small, soft smile that held more emotion than words could express. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. He whispered first, speaking the truth she never expected. He said he never meant to hide anything from her. He was just tired of people treating him differently because of his money. He wanted to feel normal, even for a few days. He wanted to talk to someone who saw him as a human, not a businessman, not a millionaire. He told her that when he met her, someone so genuine, kind, and real, he felt a peace he hadn't felt in years. That was why he stayed quiet about his identity, why he chose simplicity, why he kept his world small around her. He didn't expect feelings to grow. He didn't expect her to matter so much. Mia felt her eyes fill with tears. Her voice trembled as she whispered an apology, not because he was rich, not because he was her boss, but because she had judged him, hurt him, doubted him. But Ethan shook his head softly, telling her she didn't owe him anything. He said she had treated him more kindly than anyone else ever had, even when she thought he had nothing. That kindness meant more than any apology. The staff moved away, giving them space, sensing something emotional happening between them. The world around them blurred. It felt like they were standing inside a bubble of quiet understanding and tender truth. Then, almost hesitantly, Ethan asked if she wanted to take a walk with him, to talk, just talk, without fear or walls. Mia nodded quietly, wiping her eyes. They walked to the garden where so many of their moments had started, the place where they had sat in silence, smiled softly, misunderstood each other, and slowly found comfort in each other's presence. Today, the garden felt different, brighter, warmer, more meaningful. They sat under the same tree, the branches swaying gently above them, and for the first time, they talked with open hearts. They spoke about their fears, their past hurts, their hopes, and their trust. Mia shared the pain from her last relationship, how betrayal had made her fear love. Ethan shared how wealth had made his relationships feel confusing and shallow. And slowly, gently, their truths connected like two broken pieces, finding their perfect fit. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Ethan looked at Mia with a soft, almost shy expression. He told her that he didn't want the simplicity between them to end just because she knew the truth now. He wanted to know her more. He wanted to continue whatever had started between them, not as owner and staff, not as rich and ordinary, just as two hearts that found each other in the most unexpected way. A warmth spread through Mia's chest, soft, hopeful, and healing. She nodded, smiling through her tears, and whispered that she wanted the same. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Not because he was rich, but because he understood her heart without trying to change it. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of flowers around them. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't. She placed her hand in his, and in that simple moment, everything changed. The fears, the misunderstandings, the secrets, they all faded quietly, leaving behind something honest and beautiful. Their story didn't need dramatic promises or grand gestures. It only needed this two people choosing each other, softly, bravely, and truthfully. And as the day ended, as the orange light wrapped around them, Mia finally understood why her heart had recognized him from the start. It wasn't because he was a millionaire hiding behind simplicity. It was because he was the kind of love she had been waiting for all along, gentle, real, and worth trusting. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.